Often in recruitment, the best employee doesn't always get the job. It's the best interviewee on the day. It's a really sad fact about the recruitment process. So in this video today, what I'm going to teach you is how to answer behavioural questions using a structured technique that's going to improve your interview performance significantly. Hi, my name is Inika McMahon. I'm an executive recruiter with almost 2 decades of experience placing executives across a whole range of industries. I'm a career strategist as featured in Forbes and also the co-founder of the Path to Promotion, which is a learning and development academy where we show you how to not only get ahead in your career, but also how to find fulfillment doing work you truly love. And of course, get a promotion if that's something you're after. This interview series has been developed in order to answer some of the frequently asked questions that job seekers ask me during a career transition process. Thank you so much for watching. If you get some value out of the video today, I'd love you to do me a huge favour and give us a thumbs up or subscribe to the channel, because that tells the overlords at YouTube that the content is good and it helps other people to find our videos. Now, this video is going to have 3 parts. Firstly, what I'm going to do is teach you how to use the STAR technique to answer behavioural interview questions. Secondly, I'm going to talk you through 7 strategies that when applied to and using the STAR technique, an interview will see you ace it and get hired. Finally, I'm going to give you an example that you can learn from, so you're going to want to stick around to the end for that. As someone who has interviewed literally thousands of senior executives, it's always really impressive when a candidate can clearly and succinctly answer a question with all of the appropriate quantitative data. This video is going to teach you exactly how to do this. So, you heard me say earlier the STAR technique. What is the STAR technique? It's just a way for you to organise your thoughts and answer interview questions, making sure you get to the key points and the one that the interviewers are most interested in, which are the results. So what does the STAR technique stand for? It's situation, task, action, and results. So how do you do this in real life? Well, let's say, for example, one of the interviews questions that you're asked is to describe your last employment, a pretty popular question. In your head, you think situation, task, action, results, and you use that to organise your thoughts. An example might go something along the lines of this. In my previous role as general manager in my past organisation, one of the key challenges when I took over the role is that we had a particular business unit that was currently losing money. My task from the board was to ensure that we either closed that business unit down or brought it up to a point where it was profitable. The actions that I took were, I recruited a complete new leadership team, I looked at minimising wastage, etc., etc. And not only did we keep the business, but we managed to contribute a further 15% to the bottom line of the company from that business unit in the following 12 months. So the first thing you want to do when answering a behavioural interview question is describe a work-related situation or a task that you needed to accomplish, directly related to what they're looking for in the role. You want to be concise, you want to give good quantitative data, and you do not want to rabbit on. So let's overview this again. The situation phase is where you outline what the problem or the situation was. The task is where you outline the task that you had to accomplish. The actions are where you describe what you did and how you did it. And the results phase is where you outlined not only what you accomplished, but also what you learned, how much time or money that you saved, and how your results solved the problem that you outlined in a situation phase. Look, behavioural or competency-based interviews are simply a set of questions that ask you to talk about examples from your past work experience in a way that can help the interview panel understand where you have skills that are transferable to the role that they are recruiting. Behavioural interviewers are going to look at 3 parts. Firstly, they're going to look at the quality of your answer. That's the content. Second, they're going to look at how it relates to the challenges that their current role is facing. And finally, they're going to look at how you answer the question. So that's your presentation skills. In order to prepare for a behavioural interview, you really need to spend time analysing the job description, going through your resume and thinking of stories that could relate to any potential behavioural interview questions that might get asked on the day. Every interview for every job is completely different, so you need to be really well prepared for what you think the interviewers might want to hear. So is it going to be dealing with stakeholders? Is it going to be operational excellence? What are the key components of the role that you've applied for that you might get asked about? Now, I've got a whole video on how to prepare for an interview, so if you haven't seen that one, you want to watch that next. Okay, now let's talk through the 7 key steps and strategies to ensure that your answers are the best quality possible. Often, behavioural interview questions may have 2 or even 3 parts. For example, an interviewer might ask you a question something along the lines of this. Can you tell us about a time when you had to deal with a complex problem, who the stakeholders were that you had to engage with, and how you went about solving the problem and the results you achieved? So that's 3 parts. So the step number 1 is write it down. You want to write down the 3 parts of the question to make sure that you can answer it all. You want to carefully listen to the question, jot your notes, and if you like, you can even repeat the question back to the interview panel to make sure that you've got all of it. Key here is making sure that you let the interviewer finish the whole question before you even start thinking about how you're going to answer. This is a mistake I see so many candidates make. They hear complex problem, they immediately start thinking of a complex problem that they've solved, and they spend their whole answer outlining that part, and they miss a key component, which might be the stakeholders that they had to engage with. So it is okay to take a bit of a pause before you answer. And if you're answering the question using the STAR technique, which we talked about earlier, so describing the situation, the task before you, the actions you took, and the results, make sure that you've covered all 3 of the points in the question. All right, step number 2, make sure you choose your language carefully. In the video that I mentioned earlier about how to prepare for an interview, where the link is below, I talk about really having a look at using language that is specific to your industry, specific to the role that you're applying for, and also to the company that you're applying to. So using their buzzwords and terminology doesn't only make you look like more of an expert, but it will also psychologically connect you better with the panel if you are speaking in their language. Step number 3 is do not go into ridiculous amounts of detail. Give the interviewer the basic facts and a really good overview, because there's a lot of information to digest as an interviewer, and I can tell you that explaining things in a short and simple manner achieves 2 things. Firstly, the interviewers are going to find it easier to digest, and 2, they're more likely to remember it. If the interviewer wants more specific detail about a part of a question, they can always ask it, but I find if you've used the STAR technique effectively, you've probably covered all of the key points, especially if you're including all of the numbers and the quantitative data in your results section. Step number 5. This is one of the most important. Do not ever place blame on others or previous organisations for your failures. It's okay to fail. If you get asked a behavioural question about failure, take responsibility for your part in it, outline what you learned and how you grew from the experience. It's okay to have a completely honest conversation with your recruiter about a company culture that is poor or a previous hiring manager that was poor, but in a panel interview situation or an interview with a hiring manager, please do not speak badly about an organisation, because that is the only thing that will stick in the interviewer's mind. It is your goal and your job to remain as positive as possible. Don't be defensive, you're here to get hired. Now, I was once on a panel for a very senior role with one of Australia's largest local councils, and the CEO asked each candidate to talk about a time where they have failed and what lesson that they learned. Now, this was a really important question, particularly for the role that we were recruiting for, because there were going to be lots of new situations with this particular role where no one would have had exposure to all of them before. That was impossible. And often getting a good result meant trying something innovative, and not all of those things were going to work. So they really wanted to see how the candidates dealt with things that didn't work out. So one candidate in particular who'd been an absolute standout on paper, firstly talked about a time their previous CEO had made a huge problem and how they swooped in and saved the day. And the CEO said again, "No, I'm after a time where you failed." And the next example the candidate gave was when their team that they were in was failing to meet a deadline, and it was all one of their peers' fault. And just based on this one question, they, flew in and saved the day again. And based on this one answer, the panel decided that the candidate wasn't right for the role and went with another candidate. So that's important to remember. Step number 6, the most important part needs to be at the beginning and the end of your answer. Simple human nature and how we are wired is to remember the first and the last bits. So make sure these are interesting and the most relevant parts, first and last. Step number 7, stay concise, stay on point, use quantitative data and numbers to back up your answers. The more senior you are, the more important it is that you know this information. If you're asked a specific question about a budget or a number that you're responsible for and you give a vague answer, e.g. around $1 million, That demonstrates to the panel or the hiring manager that you do not have good attention to detail for things that you are responsible for. So when you're in that review phase, review results and remember your numbers. Okay, so now we've outlined the 7 steps that you need to effectively use when you're using the STAR technique, and let's look at an example that you can learn from. Here's an example question. Tell us about a time that you had to take charge of a situation in changing corporate policy. Now, the answer that I'm going to give you here is an answer that a real candidate gave at an interview when I was on the panel to a similar question. And the answer got this person the job. It was a high-level governmental role where changes in legislation meant that new corporate policies needed to be delivered in order to align with these changes. So what the candidate did was firstly outline the situation. They said something along the lines of, when I was the risk and compliance manager for XYZ company that at the time was delivering $1.6 billion worth of construction projects, we had to stay across changes in legislation to ensure that we were compliant at all times. And then they gave examples to say this could be something as small as rules around where barriers needed to be when working on road projects to as complex as how to report on PPP requirements with government and private partnership scenarios. They outlined the task. And they said something along the lines of, as a risk and compliance director, my team consisted of, outlined the team, and how they stayed across the legislatively lived changes. They talked about the actions that they took. So they talked about a specific legislative change where they workshopped with key members across every area of their business to identify any risks and come up with solutions about how they could better use corporate policies, systems and processes to ensure that not only did everyone understand the requirements, but that they complied with them. Remember, it's the results section where they outlined the processes that they implemented and the results of the organisation in quantifiable terms. Needless to say, the panel was super impressed. And I will also point out at this time that the candidate was one of 5 candidates that was going for the role and was the only one on the shortlist that didn't have a specific educational qualification that was seen as really important at the beginning of the process. But by answering this question in this way, the candidate was able to demonstrate to the panel why they were the best fit to the role. So let me just recap that again. This candidate outlined a situation that was similar to issues that were facing the business. They outlined the team that they managed, the problem that they arose, how they found a solution, and most important, what the results were to the organisation. It was clear, it was succinct, it was concise, and it was in a great style. And also note that results were tied to the problem, which were legislative changes had occurred, and in order to be in compliant, actions had to be taken and the organisation needed to be aware of them. There's no point writing corporate policy if no one reads, understands or follows it. So explaining how they had created workshops with members of each team across the organisation to ensure they covered off the operating procedures of every team and how the changes would impact them, not only ensured greater take-up across the organisation, but it was a fantastic answer. Now, thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear in the comments section, if that's okay, the most interesting question you've ever been asked in a video. Leave me a comment and I do read them all, and I'd love to get back to you on any questions that you've got. So again, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you found this of value, and also we've got a link below to the ultimate employee guide on how to get a pay rise, a promotion or more perks at work. I'm Monica McMahon. Thank you so much for watching.